From the Aishin Broadcast Studio, it's Wash Talk.
Welcome to the Professional Car Washing and Detailing's Wash Talk. I'm your host, Brian Ankney. Today, my guest is Justin Pope from Allied Molded Products. Welcome, Justin.
Hey, Brian. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming in today.
Thank you.
Can we just get started with a little bit about you? Tell me a little bit about the career path that brought you into the exciting world of molded products.
Yeah, so I am the Allied Molded Regional Sales Manager for the East Coast of the U.S. Mm-hmm. I started in the enclosure world about 12 years ago when I was a kid coming out of college. It was a few years after the Great Recession. It was 2012 at the time, and jobs weren't really easy to come by. So the day I graduated college, a headhunter contacted me and said, "Hey, I got a gig for you at this electrical enclosure manufacturer." I said, "Well, I got to pay bills. Does it pay?" And that was about the extent of the screening process. So yeah, I took it, and I spent a few years there working my way up. And then in 2016, I jumped over to Allied Molded and got involved in the world of non-metallic enclosures. So I've been working with boxes, really since I've been an adult. So it's kind of like second nature to me now.
Cool.
But yeah, I live in Buffalo, New York. Big Buffalo Bills fan, big hockey fan by Buffalo Sabres. And then we, had to like the snow in the Niagara Falls too. It kind of comes with the package.
Nice. Well, let's talk about enclosures.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the basics. What is an enclosure? What does it do? Where do you use it?
So an enclosure, it's kind of like something as a consumer, you walk into a car wash or any other place where they use enclosures and you don't really notice them because they kind of just blend into the environment. But an enclosure is all about protection. So really, an enclosure, its purpose serves two functions. First is safety. So anytime you have an enclosure anywhere, whether it's a car wash or anywhere else, there's going to be power, something that's powered connecting into something inside that box. So the job of the enclosure is to protect whatever that power source is from the environment. So if it's getting wet, if it's getting chemicals, if it's keeping people from touching things they're not supposed to touch. Mm-hmm. So it's a big safety feature there for any part of a car wash tunnel. And then secondly, in some cases, it's the product itself. So if it's an enclosure where they're mounting it and it's monitoring the air of the environment, or it's administering chemicals into the water of the car wash, anything like that where it needs to protect what's inside, it needs to look good because it is part of the product. It's not just a box on a wall. It's something that's going to attract people's eyes. So it's got to look good and it's got to protect what's inside.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, now, in the world of enclosures, there's a lot of choices when it comes to materials.
Yes.
It seems like anything that is solid, somebody's made an enclosure out of it. Can you speak to a little bit about, what makes a material right for a particular purpose, and when do you use each type of material?
Yeah, so Allied Molded, we manufacture non-metallic enclosures, so that specifically speaking, that's fiberglass and polycarbonate plastic. Mm-hmm. So when talking about which enclosure to use, which material of enclosure to use, there's a few different considerations. You got to think about, first off, where is it going? Mm-hmm. Because it has to be put in a position where it's going to, achieve that primary goal of protecting what's inside of it. So in a car wash tunnel, for example, an enclosure has to be able to resist water, has to be able to resist the corrosion of the cleaning agents inside the car wash. So, enclosures have traditionally been metal in a lot of cases, steel and stainless steel. The problem with steel is that it can rust very easily under the conditions of a car wash. Mm-hmm. And stainless steel, it won't rust, but it's very expensive, it's very heavy. In a lot of cases, if you got to put a hole in it to run conduit inside of it or anything like that, it's very hard to machine. It's a very unforgiving material. So non-metallic, like what we make at Allied Molded, it really serves a nice in-between because the non-metallics, they don't rust, so you don't have to worry about the corrosion, and they're very light and easy to work with. They are easily modifiable. You can put a hole or a cutout in them fairly easily, and then they're lightweight. So if you have an installer or a contractor, they can, finagle it into place without having to, call three buddies over to try to hoist it up onto a wall or anything like that. So it's just kind of an ease of use without sacrificing, the durability of the enclosure itself.
Okay.
Yeah.
When you're talking about the durability and lifespan, let's dig a little deeper into that. It's apparent that if you're building a new car wash, you're going to need some enclosures, and probably if you're refitting or adding new equipment, you're going to need some enclosures. But if you go with an enclosure that is resistant to water and to the cleaning agents inside the car wash, what's the lifespan like? I mean, is this something that you're going to be looking at? Is it every year, every 5 years, every 10 years? Does it vary by the materials you choose?
Yeah, so the durability of an enclosure will always vary based on the environment it's in. An enclosure that's kind of just getting hit with some clean water every now and then is going to last longer than an enclosure that's getting hit with the nastiest chemicals you could think of.
Yeah.
But an enclosure, a non-metallic enclosure, can last decades, really.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, if it's in a friendly enough environment and it's properly installed and everything is up to par on that end of things, I mean, it'll probably last as long as the tunnel itself. And that's really why we've made a lot of inroads in the car wash industry, is because, people don't want to have their tunnel break down because a box failed. It caused a short circuit on a machine somewhere, shuts down the car wash until they fix the whole thing. That's lost time and money and revenue for car wash operators. So it's nice to be able to put a box in place and know it's going to last, and that's really where we've seen our foot get in the door with the market there.
Presented from the Ishin Broadcast Studio at Babcock's Media.
Now, what about the enclosures that are required outside of the car wash? I mean, for vacuums, for anything, point of sale equipment, for anything else. I mean, I guess you're still going to have the issue of water. If you're near the ocean, or if you're in Buffalo where you use a lot of salt, you're still going to have some corrosive chemicals.
Yes, for sure.
But sunlight, water, salt. How does that affect an enclosure?
So the enclosure, the sun is a very underrated problem for enclosures across the board, because the sun, if you've ever seen like playground equipment that sits in the sun all the time, it eventually kind of starts to break down because the UV light of the sun is really unforgiving. Mm-hmm. Non-metallic enclosures do a good job holding up against that. Well, we take some extra steps to try to maximize the durability of our enclosures. We use a proprietary formulation called UltraGuard in our material. Mm-hmm. We mold in that, and that adds to the lifespan of the enclosure, as well as using anything that is metal on our enclosure. We do a 316 stainless steel, which is pretty much like the highest quality metal you can use on a box. And that's really just to maximize the durability of any application that our boxes are used in, including the car wash or anywhere else. So it really depends on the environment, but it's a game of how do we get our enclosures to last the longest, because ultimately that's really what, standing that test of time is really how you separate yourself from, a pretty crowded field we're in.
You mentioned earlier, if something breaks down, the car wash doesn't run. That's unbelievably expensive.
Yes.
While you figure out why it's not running. Then we talked about the materials and the difference they can make in a enclosure. What else is there? Like what else is there that makes one enclosure better than another? Because I imagine every car wash owner that you speak to probably says, look, I just want this thing to work, and I want my car wash to run, and I want to make money. So what are the other factors that come into account?
So when you're picking an enclosure for an application, you have to consider a few things. You want to obviously make sure that the goal, the name of the game is to make sure that the enclosure matches up to the degree of protection that you need. So you want to answer some key questions, like, for example, is the box gasketed? Is there a seal on the door that goes between the body of the enclosure and the door when you close it to keep that air out, to keep the moisture out, to keep chemicals out, to keep things from getting inside that aren't supposed to get inside? You want to think about how rigid the box is. There are some enclosures that are designed for light-duty applications, as simple as, just simply not letting people put their fingers inside. That's a pretty low bar to clear from a quality standpoint, but they have a function in the marketplace. But what you don't want to do is pick the wrong quality enclosure for the application you're using. So you want to look at how thick the walls of an enclosure are. Are they rigid? Because if they flex, if there's wobble in that enclosure, it's more prone to leaking once it's outdoors or once it's out in its element. So you definitely want to look for those types of physical characteristics, and also you want to see a box that's UL listed. UL is an oversight committee in the industry. When it's UL listed and approved, it's tested and verified to meet certain standards of quality and construction, so that it's going to perform to the function that we advertise it to perform to.
I hadn't thought about this, but what about impact resistance? I mean, is that?
Sure.
I imagine you've got the ones that are out of the way that are protected against water and chemical, but you also, if you put them outside where people are driving around and people are bumping into stuff, like how do you factor in the impact resistance?
Yeah, so every material has a certain impact resistance rating, and we catalog that for all of our enclosures. Ultimately, it depends on where it's going. I mean, we have boxes that are subject to people, kids taking baseball bats to them and stuff just for fun, one of those types of things.
Wow.
But you want to just kind of check and see that the box is heavy duty enough to withstand your run-of-the-mill abuse. I mean, ultimately, if someone wants to break an enclosure open, it's kind of hard to keep someone out if they're really that intent on it.
Yeah.
But typically with the fiberglass and the polycarbonate, there's enough flex in the material that it's pretty resistant to, your run-of-the-mill physical contact. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I guess if somebody wants to get in there, I mean, we haven't. There's not a safe out there that somebody can't crack, right?
Exactly. I mean, there's no such thing as like a crowbar rating, but there are typically safeguards in place, and the thickness of the box itself. I mean, it's not going to just be hand broken into it. You have to really have some tools and some determination to get inside some of those things.
This is an exciting time to be alive. Technology is changing everything around us. It's unbelievable how quickly everything changes. What's changing for you? Like, what do you see changing in your business with all the new technology that's coming?
So that's a great question. COVID has really been a learning experience for Allied and Molded as a company. Mm-hmm. I think there's not a company out there that didn't face some challenges that maybe they weren't expecting or didn't know that were out there until COVID kind of hit you in the face with it. And that was the true for us as well. We've adapted to the COVID times, and following COVID, we've really been investing in our manufacturing technology. We've really been modernizing the way we do things at the factory, doing some automation, doing some new research and development on manufacturing processes. And really our goal is to deliver the most protection a box can offer at a more competitive price point. That's really how we demonstrate our value in the car wash industry. Is we want to give the most protection for the lowest price point. So we've really made some strides over these last few years at corporate, looking into how we can do things differently and how we can, improve our manufacturing process. So that's really exciting times for us.
Great. Justin, is there anything more you'd like to share with our audience today?
Well, I'm excited that, coming out of COVID, we're ramping up our product development again. Most enclosures you find are kind of rectangular in shape. They're 12 by 10 or 10 by 8, and we've really been kind of missing the mark on getting a more square size enclosure. And, it doesn't seem like it, but sometimes, it's a game of inches in the enclosure world sometimes. People really want size flexibility. So we are releasing an 8 by 8 by 4 enclosure in our Ultraline series this summer, and that'll give people a little bit more of a balanced height by width dimension, whereas kind of go against some of the grain of our product line where everything is more rectangular. So we're really excited about that.
Hey, thank you for coming in today.
Hey, thanks for having me.
And thank you for taking the time to join us for this professional car washing and detailing's Wash Talk. I'm your host, Brian Ankney. Today my guest has been Justin Pope from Allied Molded. We hope to see you again on a future episode.